The rate of running-related injuries has been on the rise since the 1970s. It is now estimated that up to 79% of recreational runners will end up with an injury after just 1 year of running. These statistics are not good, considering that running is pretty much built into our DNA. If these rates of running-related injuries had occurred among other animals, like lions for example, well, we would only have known that they ever existed through fossil records. Animals wouldn't survive with these statistics. In fact, it is only due to technology that we are still alive with these injury rates. Therefore, that fact that we still exist implies that our hunter-gatherer ancestors were not plagued by the number of running-related injuries that we see today. So what has gone wrong and how did we get to this point? Well, the scientific literature points to what is known as risk factors. The authors of a popular literature review found that there was a significant rise in injury rates when training volume exceeded 64 kilometers of running per week. A recent study on the Ethiopian long-distance runners had similar results. Injury rates spiked significantly among athletes who ran more than 60 kilometers per week. Running on uneven surfaces, such as in trail running, seems to be another risk factor for injury. A meta-analysis of 17 related studies found that previous injury was also a strong risk factor for future injury. However, these risk factors don't tell us the whole story. To see the full picture, we need to be asking ourselves why something is considered a risk factor. For example, why is it that running more than 60 kilometers per week drastically increases one's risk for injury? And why do previous injuries often reoccur? There are so many athletes who run ultramarathons, train high volume, and do so on varying surfaces without getting injured. Why can they do it while the majority can't? Are these individuals just anomalies, genetically superior, or have these individuals just found ways to reduce their risk of injury? One such athlete is Dean Karnazes, an American-born Greek who is famous for running 560 kilometers in 80 hours and 44 minutes in 2005 without sleep. A year later, he ran a marathon in each of America's 50 states in 50 consecutive days. So how does a man like Dean, who's accomplished these extreme physical feats and is known to run about 50 kilometers a day in training, not get injured? Well, he actually answered this question in a seminar he did a few years ago at Google. This is what he said.
So, a couple of things that I have that work in my favor. I have pretty good biomechanics. So my alignment is really good, and that means when I run, I don't pronate or supinate. I've always been what's called a midfoot striker. So there's kind of this trend now in running, kind of barefoot running, minimalist footwear, which encourages you to strike midfoot on your stride. With shorter, smaller steps with a kind of a cant to your body that's slightly forward. What they found that people who strike midfoot are less prone to injuries, but what they do is they've done analysis of people on a soft surface, like on a soft treadmill, and found that most people running barefoot on a soft surface will inherently strike midfoot. But then when you put them in a big padded shoe with a big EVA slab under their heel, they'll go to this heel-toe roll. And it's that heel strike to the rolling motion that causes a lot of running-related injuries. I've never had that. I've always had a natural gait and had naturally good alignment.
So what Dean explains here is that running in thick padded shoes promotes a heel striking movement pattern. The change in running style is probably due to the fact that the cushioned shoes block a lot of the feeling we get with the ground upon impact. This makes sense because as a test, if you have to take your shoes off, then jump and land on your heels, you'll get such a sharp jolt up your body that you'll make sure you never land on your heels again. So to reiterate, barefoot runners who predominantly forefoot strike are able to utilize their Achilles tendon and calf muscles more efficiently while running. These connective tissues and musculature help prevent injury and enhance athletic performance. Ross Edgley, the man who famously swam around Great Britain, agrees with these statements. Let's see what he had to say in his video on how he was able to run 30 marathons in 30 days.
Running is a skill, and that sounds really odd to many people because it's something we're innately born to do. But so many people are doing it wrong. And allow me to explain what I mean by that. Basically, because of the invention of the shoe, a lot of people are encouraged now to heel strike, and what that means is as they're running, if you imagine that's their foot, they're basically putting a lot of pressure on the heel, and they're not forefoot striking and actually running on the balls of their feet like arguably Mother Nature intended. Now it's still debated to this day, and in sports science there's not necessarily an agreed consensus yet, so I think that's important to note. But If you look anecdotally and looking at the anthropology of the human runner, we've developed these, ligaments, tendons, the Achilles heel, all of these things were created, the architecture of the actual foot were created so you forefoot strike and therefore absorb all of the pressure.
Again, this is a man who should be riddled with injuries due to the volume of physical training he puts his body through every day. But obviously, these guys have figured out how they can remain injury-free, and the cool thing is that they are sharing this wisdom with us. Nevertheless, I'm still a scientist, so despite these testimonials, I would like some type of scientific validation. I mean, can modern footwear really be causing such havoc on our bodies and the way we run? I thought they are supposed to help prevent injury by fixing the way we run. Well, let's see what the science has to say about this. Can specialized running shoes support the arches of our feet to improve the way we run and ultimately reduce our risk of injury? Well, a study published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research was conducted by the US Army on over 3,000 soldier trainees to see if specialized running shoes could reduce injury rates during their grueling 9-week basics training protocol. The researchers split their participants into two groups, a control group and an experimental group. Those in the control group were all given the same standard stability shoes made by New Balance, regardless of the shape of each participant's foot arch. However, each individual in the experimental group was assigned a need-specific type shoe. Those assessed at having flat arches received control type shoes. Those with high arches got cushion type shoes, and stability shoes were allocated to those with normal arched feet. The participants in this group could then choose from the various mainstream manufacturers that produce specialized models that cater to their prescribed needs, as recommended by the various shoe companies. After the 9 weeks of basic training, the results were astounding. No differences in the injury rate was found between the two groups, even after accounting for factors such as gender and previous injury. The results from this study suggest that specialized running shoes might not be as effective at preventing injuries as once thought. Perhaps sticking a band-aid over a problem in the form of fancy footwear is not the way to solve the root cause of the problem. We would probably be far better off targeting the body directly so that we can build up its natural structures to support themselves. This makes total sense to me. I mean, if excessive pronation or collapsed arches, commonly looked upon as flat feet, is such a problem, then surely we can't just solve the issue by wearing a pair of fancy shoes. Well, let's break it down to see why modern footwear has missed the boat. Why is modern footwear causing flat feet and excessive pronation? The feet are comprised partly of 100 stabilizing muscles and 105 sensors, which work together to detect the ground and maintain a stable arch during walking, running, and every other athletic movement. Unfortunately, modern footwear, with their arch support and thick soles, blunt the foot sensors. As a result, the internal musculature are no longer stimulated to maintain an arch, causing them to become lazy and weak. Flat feet and overpronation are signs of this dysfunction. We could compare the function of the foot's bony structures to that of the spine and its surrounding musculature, like the core meant to stabilize it. Continuing this thought, the ankles then act as the hips, meant to hinge and generate the moving forces. Just like we shouldn't rely on a weightlifting belt to always stabilize the spine, so we shouldn't rely on modern footwear or inner soles to stabilize our feet. So, too much support is obviously not optimal, especially when we have innate structures that are very capable of supporting themselves if given a chance. This is where our sensory feedback becomes so important, as briefly mentioned in the animation. Basically, we rely heavily on our sense of touch to stimulate, through electrical impulses, our muscles to contract and adjust themselves to our ever-changing environment. This concept can be best explained with our hands. A surgeon, for example, relies on his sense of touch to perform high-precision surgery. Now, you wouldn't see a surgeon wearing oven mitts while performing an operation, right? No, thick gloves would dull the sensation in his fingers and restrict the motion of his hands, and consequently, the ability to react quickly and be precise during the procedure. Instead, surgeons use ultra-thin and flexible latex to protect their patients from infection while still preserving their sense of touch and fine motor skills. This concept can also be applied to the feet, where we also have a dense network of nerve endings, just like in the hands. Barriers like thick-soled shoes placed between our feet and the ground can also hamper our sense of feeling of the environment. The potential result of such a restriction is severely altered balance and motor patterns, which changes the efficiency in which we move and increase our risk of injury. To understand this concept further, let's take a look at the spring model we built from the design presented by the University of Calgary to represent the muscles that attach around the ankle in the paper titled Barefoot Running, Some Critical Considerations. The Barefoot model has 4 long elastic bands which represent the bigger muscles from the leg that attach around the ankle and which behave as the primary movers, capable of producing large amounts of force over a wide range of motion. The shorter bands represent the smaller muscles coming from the foot, which make fast and precise micro-adjustments in response to the ever-changing environment, making them excellent stabilizers. As can be seen in the model, the stability potential of the smaller bands is due to their placement, line of action, and size, which help them react faster than the big bands. Okay, so now what happens when we stick a stiff, thick-soled shoe on? Well, as mentioned earlier, the foot is restricted due to a loss of sensation and fine motor control of the smaller muscles. It's the same as removing the little bands in our ankle model. As an experiment, we compared the overall stability and reaction time of these 2 models when the upright, representing the shin bone, was agitated. To do this, we set up a camera on a fixed tripod, shooting at 60 frames per second for high-speed capture. We also fixed the base plate to a table using double-sided tape so that it didn't move around. A board with angular measurements was fixed on the backdrop as a reference to compare the range of motion between the uprights of the 2 models. Then, one at a time, the uprights were pulled back to end range and released. The first model, which includes both the small and large bands, moved past its resting position set at 0 by around 29 degrees and took 41 frames to find stability. When we removed the small bands and repeated the test, the upright moved past its resting position by 37 degrees and took 46 frames to find stability. That's a 28% increase in range of motion and a 12% increase in time to stability when the small bands were removed. When we superimpose the 2 images, the differences in stability and reaction times can clearly be seen. So what does this experiment show us? Well, it shows that we rely on our smaller muscles to keep us stable and prevent excessive movement at end ranges of motion. This can be especially helpful during loading tasks such as on impact during running to prevent injury. Furthermore, when those small muscles are active, not only do they react quickly so that we can easily navigate the surfaces we are moving on, but they also remove excess stress from the big muscles, which would otherwise have to do both the moving and the stabilizing. It's no wonder that hamstring and calf pulls, as well as shin splints, are so common. These issues can be a sign that the bigger muscles are overloaded with work that they shouldn't be doing. It's then no surprise that studies have shown that balance is improved when barefoot compared to wearing shoes, because the small muscles are unrestricted and thus able to do their job. So in conclusion, if you want to improve your balance and athletic ability and reduce your risk of injury while running, then it might be time to liberate your feet from the confinement of modern footwear completely and exercise barefoot, or at the very least, utilize barefoot shoes, which are designed to mimic barefoot motion. I've been wearing barefoot shoes for a few years now, and they really have made a drastic improvement in the way I move and consequently the way my body has developed from exercise. We will be covering more running and its related topics in the future, so consider subscribing to check those out when they become available. We have also done a review on barefoot running shoes in the past, which can be seen here. Anyways, thanks for watching, and until next time, keep on exercising your health. Cheers.